There's a brutal truth most women don't want to face, but I need to say it right now. A man's silence does not always mean he doesn't care. And if you cling to that false belief, you'll lose yourself long before you ever lose him. Since you were a little girl, the world has been drilling a poisonous script into your mind that real love is measured by constant texts, daily calls, endless check-ins, that if he truly loved you, he would be chasing you every second of the day. But those sweet-sounding lies have shackled you to your phone, making every hour of silence feel like a blade cutting into your chest. And so, you spiral. You invent stories in your head. You imagine betrayal, indifference, abandonment. You start thinking the silence is proof that something is wrong with you. But here's the reality. No one ever taught you the real meaning of silence. A man's silence is not chaos. It's not random. It's not an unsolvable mystery. It is a mirror, reflecting his state of mind, his struggles, his way of testing the space between you and him. Sometimes, consciously or unconsciously, he pulls back just to see how you'll react when he's gone. Will you remain grounded, steady in your energy, unshaken by his absence? Or will you collapse into panic, rushing to fill the void with desperate texts, disguised as casual check-ins? Hey, how are you? Is everything okay? Haven't heard from you. Just wondering why you're so quiet. You tell yourself you're being caring, but deep down, you know you're bleeding power with every word. And here's the part that cuts the deepest. Many men don't even need to manipulate you on purpose. They simply withdraw. And in that space, your reaction tells them everything. If you crumble without their attention, if your sense of worth depends on the buzz of a phone, they know exactly how much power they hold over you. And that is the beginning of an invisible chain around your neck. Think about this. Brilliant women, CEOs, mothers, warriors who have survived heartbreak and built empires from ashes, turn into trembling, insecure shadows of themselves the moment a man goes silent. Women who can face the storm of life without blinking somehow can't face a few hours without a message. That's not weakness. It's conditioning. Society has taught you to misread silence, to equate it with rejection, to turn absence into a personal indictment. But I need you to hear me. Every time you react from desperation, every time you lose your center because he vanishes into silence, you hand over your power. You are training him to believe he can control you without even lifting a finger. This is where philosophy collides with love. The ancient Stoics taught something the modern world has forgotten. Your peace is not defined by who reaches for you. It is defined by how unshakable you remain when they don't. A woman who stays centered while a man drifts into silence is not cold. She is powerful. She is not detached. She is free. Because when he finally comes back, and trust me, he will, he won't find a woman who was waiting. He'll find a woman who kept living, building, laughing, creating. A woman who did not pause her world for the absence of his presence. And that difference hits a man in his core. But let's be real for a moment. Sometimes his silence isn't about you at all. It's not a punishment, not a manipulation, not a hidden insult. Sometimes he's consumed by his own battles, buried in his goals, drowning in his distractions. Men are wired differently. They can compartmentalize, shut off one part of life while throwing themselves into another. They can vanish into work, family issues, personal demons. And yes, it stings when you're making space for him while he seems to vanish into his own world. But here lies the paradox that can transform everything for you. His silence is not just empty space. It is an invitation, a signal from the universe whispering, While he is in his world, build yours. When was the last time you were so lost in your passions that you didn't even notice the silence? When was the last time you forgot to check your phone because you were too busy chasing your own goals, too alive in your own story? The uncomfortable truth is this: too many women hand over their emotional well-being to the rhythm of a man's attention. Their joy rises and falls on the tides of his texts. But you were not born to orbit around anyone. You are your own universe. You have dreams to build, milestones to reach, experiences to claim. So while he stays silent, find your voice. While he drifts away, come closer to yourself. While he forgets to message, remember who you are. Because when you do, something extraordinary happens. If he comes back, he won't find a woman starving for his attention. He'll find a woman radiant with her own light, too alive to have been waiting, too full to have been emptied by silence. And whether he realizes it or not, that difference is magnetic. A woman who is whole on her own carries an energy that cannot be ignored. But let me rip away the last veil. Sometimes silence does mean disinterest. Sometimes it's the universe doing you a favor, pulling him away before you waste more years trying to convince someone to love you. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you stop fighting illusions, the sooner you reclaim your freedom. Because the real enemy is not his absence. It is your attachment to a fantasy. The fantasy of who he could be. The fantasy of what might change. The fantasy that one more text could rewrite the story. But attachment is a cage, and silence is the key that shows you the door. Here's the question that separates women who suffer endlessly from those who rise. Will you cling to the man who doesn't show up, or will you choose yourself? The second kind of woman, the one who chooses herself, knows a truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Real love never requires you to beg for it, never demands you lose yourself to keep it alive. Sometimes the silence you're agonizing over is not rejection, it's revelation. It's the mask slipping. A man who disappears without a word, who lets you drown in questions rather than offering you the dignity of clarity, is showing you everything you need to know about his capacity to love. His silence is his communication. His absence is his answer. And if you're willing to look at it with unflinching honesty, you'll see that silence as a gift, not a curse. Think about it. A man who vanishes when things get real, who hides in silence instead of speaking truth, is telling you he lacks the maturity to meet you where you are. He's confessing, without words, that he doesn't have the backbone to love you the way you deserve. And the universe, in its brutal mercy, sometimes removes these men from your life before they can waste more of your years. Silence, then, becomes protection. Sometimes the loudest no is the one unspoken, but here's where most women collapse. Instead of seeing silence as information, they turn it inward. They torture themselves with questions. What did I do wrong? Did I say too much? Was I not enough? They invent flaws, build stories, unravel their own worth. This is the trap, believing his silence is a mirror of your value. But let me burn this truth into your mind. His silence is not your deficiency. It is his revelation. His silence says nothing about who you are. It only exposes who he is. And yet, compassion whispers another possibility. Not every man's silence is cruelty or manipulation. Some men have been raised in a world that carved emotions out of them. From boyhood, they were told that vulnerability is weakness, that feelings are dangerous, that silence is strength. They learned to retreat inward rather than expose what's breaking inside them. So when they vanish, it may not be about you at all. It may be their only language for pain, stress, or fear. But here's the edge you must not lose. Understanding his wounds doesn't mean tolerating them forever. Empathy is not self-erasure. Compassion is not consent to perpetual neglect. This is where your responsibility comes in. You must ask yourself, can I live with this? Can I accept that his silence is part of who he is? Or do I need a partner who can meet me in words, in presence, in connection? Because awareness is not an invitation to abandon your own needs. You can understand his silence and still choose not to endure it. You can see his struggles and still decide they are not yours to carry. That choice, that clarity, is your power. But the deepest shift happens not when you analyze his silence, but when you reclaim it for yourself. What if, instead of obsessing over why he hasn't reached out, you turned that space into fuel? What if you used his absence not as a wound, but as a window to create, to grow, to return to yourself? Because silence, when you stop fearing it, becomes sacred. It becomes the stillness where your truest self rises. Ask yourself, what can I build in this quiet? What project have I abandoned that I could breathe life back into? What friendships have I neglected? What passions have I buried under the weight of waiting for someone's attention? His silence doesn't have to be your prison. It can be your freedom. Every hour you don't waste checking your phone is an hour you can pour into your own empire. Every day you don't crumble in his absence is a day you rise in your own presence. And here's the paradox. When you start living like that, men feel it. They sense the shift. They know when a woman is not waiting, not orbiting, not starving for crumbs. And that energy, self-sustained, full, untouchable, is magnetic. Men chase women who don't need them, who are whole without them, who radiate a life so rich that his presence is a privilege, not a requirement. But don't misunderstand this. The goal isn't to play a game, to act like you don't care in hopes he'll come running back. That's still giving him the power. No, the real shift is when you truly don't crumble, when you genuinely fill your own silence with life so abundant that his absence barely registers. That's not performance. That's transformation. Let me be honest. Getting here isn't easy. It requires stripping yourself bare, facing your patterns of dependence, unlearning everything society taught you about love. It demands that you stop equating your value with someone else's attention and start building a foundation inside yourself that no man can shake. But when you do, when you finally cross that line, you become untouchable. You become unforgettable. Because here's the truth. The woman who stays steady when a man goes silent is the woman he never forgets. Not because she's hard to get, but because she is impossible to replace. She's not following a script, not playing a role, not bending herself to be wanted. She is rooted in herself, radiating authenticity. And authenticity, unlike performance, cannot be faked, cannot be copied, cannot be taken away. Silence strips away illusions. It forces you to answer the most brutal, necessary question. Who are you when he doesn't respond? Do you unravel? Or do you rise? Do you fall into anxiety? Or do you stand in your center? That question defines not just your love life, but your entire existence. Because the same strength that keeps you steady when a man withdraws is the same strength that will carry you in every other battlefield of life, at work, with family, in your own dreams. So the next time your phone stays dark, instead of spiraling into stories, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? Not from him, but from myself. Maybe you need movement. Maybe you need stillness. Maybe you need laughter with a friend. Maybe you need to pick up that project you abandoned. Whatever it is, give it to yourself. That is how you reclaim the silence. That is how you build a life no man's absence can empty. Because here's the secret the world won't tell you. His silence is not a command for you to chase him. It's an invitation to return to yourself. And every time you choose that path, every time you feed your own soul instead of starving for his attention, you forge a power no one can take away. Here's the part no one likes to face. Sometimes the silence is not a test, not a distraction, not even a reflection of his inner struggles. It's simply disinterest. And that truth stings like fire, but it will also set you free if you let it. Because the most dangerous prison is not a man's absence. It's your attachment to the illusion of what he could be. You keep replaying the moments when he was attentive, when he looked at you like you were the only woman in the world, when his words dripped with promises. And then, when silence comes, you cling to that ghost as if it could resurrect reality. But ghosts don't love you back. Dreams don't text you good morning. Fantasies don't build a future. And here is the brutal distinction. The woman who suffers for years over a man who never shows up is not suffering from love. She's suffering from attachment. Attachment to potential, to fantasy, to the hope that maybe tomorrow he will become what she needs. But the woman who rises, who cuts through the fog, understands something liberating. If he leaves, it's because something better is waiting. If he falls silent, it's because the universe is creating space for someone who actually speaks, who actually shows up, who actually values her presence. Do you know how powerful it is to stop trying to convince someone to love you? To stop begging for clarity, attention, effort? That moment when you stop chasing is the moment you reclaim your dignity. Because real love does not require convincing. Real love does not demand that you lose yourself to keep it alive. Real love arrives and stays with effort, with presence, with choice. Anything less is a performance, and you are not here to be someone's stage. So let me tell you something that might sound controversial, but you need to hear it. A man who disappears without explanation, who ghosts you, who lacks the decency to communicate his feelings, is doing you the biggest favor you'll ever receive. Why? Because he's revealing his emotional immaturity up front. He's showing you his inability to handle conflict, his lack of respect, his cowardice. And if those qualities are visible now, imagine what years with him would cost you. Do you really want to build a life with someone who can't even send a sentence of honesty? No. You deserve someone whose silence is filled with peace, not confusion. The universe has strange ways of protecting you. Sometimes it doesn't remove people with thunder or drama. It removes them with silence. And if you learn to see silence not as rejection, but as redirection, everything changes. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" you'll begin asking, "What is this teaching me about him?" Instead of collapsing into shame, you'll rise into clarity. Silence stops being a wound and becomes wisdom. But let's not forget the other reality. Many men were never taught to express emotions, never given permission to be vulnerable. Society raised them to believe that strength means silence, that tears are weakness, that they must face everything alone. So when they feel overwhelmed, their instinct is not to reach out, but to withdraw. And sometimes that silence has nothing to do with you. It's their battle with themselves. He could be drowning in anxiety. He could be carrying the invisible weight of financial stress, family responsibility, or depression he can't name. His silence may not be rejection. It may be his way of surviving. And yet, here lies your choice again. Understanding his silence does not mean tolerating it endlessly. Compassion does not equal self-sacrifice. Empathy does not erase your needs. You can love someone, see their struggle, and still say, "This does not work for me." You can honor his journey without abandoning your own. That is the line between wisdom and self-destruction. So let me ask you, are you willing to live in a relationship where silence is the default language? Or do you crave a love that speaks, that shows up, that breathes life into you instead of leaving you gasping in the dark? Your answer to that question will shape everything, because silence may be his truth, but deciding what you allow is yours. Now let's flip the perspective completely. What if his silence is not an obstacle, but an opportunity? What if instead of asking, "Why isn't he reaching out?" you asked, "What can I create while he's not here?" What if instead of checking your phone, you checked your own soul? What if his distance became the very soil in which you grew? Because here's the secret. Silence is not empty. Silence is space. And what you choose to fill that space with, that's where your power lives. I have seen women transform in the wake of male silence. Women who launched businesses in the space where they used to cry. Women who picked up abandoned dreams, went back to school, traveled, rebuilt friendships, rediscovered passions. They stopped waiting for a message and started writing their own story. And by the time he came back, if he ever did, he didn't find a woman starving for his attention. He found a woman overflowing with her own light. And that changes everything. Because men may not admit it, but they feel the difference. They feel the magnetic pull of a woman who does not need them to breathe. They sense when a woman's joy is self-sustained, when her confidence is self-made, when her silence is not emptiness, but power. And that energy, pure, untouchable, radiant, draws them in, not from need, but from admiration. So ask yourself this: who are you becoming in his silence? The woman who waits, who aches, who hands over her peace? Or the woman who blooms, who builds, who turns every quiet hour into her kingdom? Because one of these women loses herself, and the other becomes unforgettable. And the truth is this: men rarely leave a woman who knows how to be whole without them, because her energy is undeniable. Her presence is rare. Her wholeness is magnetic. And even if he does leave, she doesn't crumble, because her world was never built on his words to begin with. Silence is a crucible. It burns away illusions, strips away the noise, and leaves you face to face with the most important question of all. Who are you when he doesn't respond? That question is not about him. It's about you. Because silence is not just about a man withholding his words. Silence is the moment the universe dares you to see yourself without distractions, without validation, without the mask of being chosen. And here's the dividing line. Some women crumble in that moment, collapsing under the weight of emptiness, making his absence mean they are unworthy. Others, rare, powerful, unforgettable, take that silence as fuel. They rise. They turn solitude into strength. They bloom in the very spaces where others wither. And that choice defines everything. It defines how men see you, how the world sees you, and most importantly, how you see yourself. Because when you unravel in silence, you're telling life itself, my worth is conditional. My joy depends on someone else showing up. But when you stand unshaken, when you refuse to let someone's absence shrink your presence, you're declaring a different truth. I am whole, with or without you. I am enough, with or without your attention. That declaration, lived fully, transforms you into a force no one can control. Here's the irony. Women who crumble in silence often end up chasing, over-explaining, apologizing for things they never did, bargaining for crumbs of attention. They beg for clarity when what they really need is courage. Courage to say, if you can't show up, I won't shrink myself to fit the silence you leave behind. Because every time you chase, you are teaching him a lesson. You don't have to value me. I'll do the work for both of us. I'll beg, I'll bend, I'll bleed. Just don't leave. And once you've handed someone that kind of power, they rarely give it back. But the women who rise in silence, those women shift the entire dynamic. When he drifts back after days or weeks of absence expecting the same desperate version of you, he instead finds a woman who didn't stop, a woman who grew, who laughed, who created, who thrived, a woman who was too busy building her own life to wither in the waiting. That realization hits a man like a punch. She doesn't need me. And paradoxically, that's the kind of woman he cannot forget. Because neediness can be replaced. Wholeness cannot. But let's be clear. The goal is not to manipulate him into coming back stronger. This is not a game. This is not about teaching him a lesson. This is about reclaiming yourself. About deciding that your life, your peace, your power will no longer be hostage to someone else's inconsistency. Because when you truly master that, silence stops being a weapon that wounds you. It becomes a mirror that strengthens you. I want you to imagine something. Imagine the next time he goes silent. Instead of spiraling into panic, you pause. You breathe. You feel the anxiety rise, but you don't collapse under it. You ask yourself, what do I need right now? What can I give myself that I keep waiting for him to give me? Maybe it's comfort. Maybe it's affirmation. Maybe it's excitement. Whatever it is, give it to yourself. Because that is the essence of true power. Not waiting for someone else to fill you, but becoming your own source of nourishment. This is where Stoicism and love meet. The Stoics never said, don't feel. They said, don't let your feelings control you. They never said, don't love. They said, love in a way that doesn't destroy your center. And that's what silence demands of you. The ability to feel the ache without surrendering your dignity. The ability to acknowledge the longing without losing yourself in it. That balance, that unshakable center, is what turns you from dependent into unstoppable. But let me warn you, this path is not for the faint of heart. It requires radical honesty with yourself. It requires looking at the parts of you that crave approval, the wounds that beg for attention, the patterns that confuse silence with rejection. It requires building a life so full of meaning that no man's absence can empty it. That means waking up with purpose, filling your days with creation, with movement, with laughter, with projects that matter. That means refusing to hand over the keys of your happiness to anyone else. And here's the payoff. When you build that kind of life, you stop tolerating crumbs. You stop justifying neglect. You stop accepting the bare minimum. Because your inner world is too rich to be satisfied with silence disguised as love. You start demanding presence, not with words, but with the undeniable energy of someone who knows her worth. And men feel that. They feel when they can't get away with giving you less than you deserve. They feel when you're the kind of woman who doesn't beg, who doesn't chase, who doesn't shrink. That energy commands respect before you even ask for it. Do you want to know the most liberating part of all this? When you stop chasing men who don't reach for you, you make space for those who do. When you stop pouring energy into silence, you redirect it into growth. And in that growth, you attract people, friends, lovers, partners, who show up consistently, who speak instead of vanish, who choose you openly instead of leaving you guessing. Because like attracts like. A woman who is whole draws people who are ready for wholeness. So the next time silence comes, and it will, see it for what it is, an invitation. Not an invitation to panic, but an invitation to rise, to return to yourself, to stand so firm in your own presence that no absence can unmake you. His silence is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your sovereignty. And that, more than anything, is the transformation silence demands. To stop asking, "Why isn't he calling me?" and to start asking, "Who am I becoming while he doesn't?" Because at the end of the day, the real battlefield isn't between you and him. It's between you and yourself. And when you conquer that, no man's silence will ever break you again. At the end of all this, there is a truth so sharp it cuts through every illusion. His silence does not define you. Your response to that silence does. That's where the real story is written. Not in the spaces between his words, but in the choices you make when those words never arrive. Because silence is a mirror. It doesn't tell you whether he's worthy. It tells you whether you're ready to stand in your own worth. When he doesn't call, when the screen stays dark, when the hours stretch into days, what happens inside you? Do you shrink, questioning your value, rewriting yourself into something smaller, just to be wanted? Or do you expand, turning that void into fuel, claiming your time, your energy, your future? That's the line. That's the defining choice. And listen to me carefully. The woman who can hold her ground in silence is the woman no man forgets. Not because she played games. Not because she pretended not to care, but because she truly didn't collapse. She refused to beg, refused to chase, refused to hand her power away like loose change. She lived, she built, she thrived. And when he came back, if he came back, he found someone radiant, not waiting. Someone too full of her own fire to have been extinguished by his absence. That kind of woman is unforgettable because she cannot be replaced. But here's what most don't realize. The point is not to keep him, or to win him back, or to make him regret. The point is to rise so completely in yourself that whether he stays or goes doesn't matter. The power is no longer in his hands. It's in yours. Because when you stop tying your peace to another person's actions, you become untouchable. When you stop chasing what doesn't choose you, you create space for what actually will. That shift changes not only your relationships, but your entire life. Think about it. The same strength that keeps you steady when he disappears is the strength that helps you negotiate for more at work. It's the strength that helps you say no to toxic friendships. It's the strength that helps you build boundaries with family, choose healthier habits, chase bigger dreams. Because the battlefield of silence trains you in the one skill that matters most in life, self-mastery. And once you master yourself, once you refuse to let the silence of others dictate your value, you become unstoppable. You stop settling. You stop waiting. You stop explaining yourself into exhaustion. You raise your standards. You protect your energy. You live like a woman who knows she is the prize, not in arrogance, but in truth. And the world bends around that kind of truth. So let me say this plainly, as if I were speaking directly to the deepest wound in your chest. Stop begging for love. Stop waiting for the phone to light up. Stop building your life around the hope that someone else will finally see your worth. You don't need to be chosen. You already are. You were born chosen. You were born worthy. And the silence you fear so much? It's not abandonment. It's an invitation to finally prove that truth to yourself. Imagine what would happen if, instead of checking your phone 100 times, you checked your goals 100 times. If, instead of replaying his last words, you rehearsed your next move. If, instead of asking, "Why isn't he texting me?" you asked, "What can I create today that makes me proud?" Do you see how different your life becomes when silence is no longer a cage, but a canvas? Because here's the secret most women never discover. The silence is not about him. It never was. It was always about you. About whether you will collapse into need or expand into power. About whether you will waste years chasing ghosts or use every quiet hour to build something real. About whether you will live as a woman who orbits around others or as a woman who stands as her own sun. And the truth? The woman who becomes her own sun never loses. If he stays in her light. If he leaves, she still burns bright. Her joy is untouchable. Her life is unshaken. Her love is abundant, but never desperate. That woman is free. So let this be the reminder you carry from this moment forward. You were not born to beg for scraps of attention. You were not born to orbit around someone else's silence. You were born to create, to radiate, to love from fullness, not from lack. And any man who cannot meet you in that space is not a tragedy. He is simply a filter, clearing the way for the one who will. His silence might be a test. It might be a wound. It might be a shield for his own pain. Or it might just be disinterest. But your response, that is what defines who you are. And if you rise in that silence, if you choose yourself in that quiet, if you build instead of break, you become unstoppable. Not just in love, but in life. So the next time your phone stays quiet, smile. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do, about yourself. Smile because silence no longer owns you. Smile because you know exactly who you are when no one else shows up. And that woman, the one who doesn't crumble, the one who doesn't beg, the one who doesn't wait, she is the woman the world can never forget. Remember this, you didn't come into this life to be someone's option. You came to be your own priority. You didn't come to beg for love. You came to radiate so much self-love that only those who can honor it are allowed near you. And your power, your real, unshakable power, has never been in his hands. It has always been in yours. Use it. Guard it. Live it.